This topic can be a bit tricky, but it's easier than what it looks. Now, before we dive deeper into how the this keyword behaves in different scenarios in the following lectures, let me say that one of the things that can lead to confusion when using the this keyword is when we think about scopes and variables and so on. So forget about that for a minute and think of execution context instead. Because, as we've seen in previous lectures, during execution, every time a function is called, an execution context is created for each function in the call stack. And precisely inside this execution context is where the value of the this keyword, together with the scope chain and the variable environment, are defined. However, this value is not something that we can change as we do with variables, because the this keyword is just a pronoun that we can use as a reference, usually to an object, whenever we need to replace that object. And at the same time, it also helps us when writing code for not repeating ourselves unnecessarily. Now, this object, to which this keyword is pointing or referring to, will be the one that is executing some function. And here's where the things become a bit tricky, because it's pretty easy to think of a simple object with some functionality or behavior inside of it. So a method that executes its own method, and that's it. End of the story. But that's not always the case, because sometimes it is not that easy to find out which is the object that is executing that function, especially if we're binding methods to objects, that is, using methods from one object on some other one, or we're using arrow functions instead of regular functions, and so on. But no worries, we'll see why objects are so important for this topic in the next lecture. But by now, just keep in mind that there's always an object behind the function call, even if you cannot see it. And something that helps is checking out which is the object before the dot, when using the dot notation. And if you cannot find any object or dot, that means that the object is a global object in whatever environment we are in. So depending on how the function is called, or let's say who is using that method, the this keyword will point to one object or another. And that's precisely what we need to find out. I'll see you in the next lecture.